And we're here. All right. I was prepared this time, and I was on it. I'm very proud of myself. How you doing, Nicholas? How's life?
I'm great. Life is weird and wonderful and super busy. Super busy.
Yeah. Yeah, I know the astrology is like off the hook right now for doing daring things and crazy like business opportunities. And I'm feeling that too. I'm very excited. Um so we had a break because there was traveling and touring and things going on. But now we're back. But it's been like 3 or 4 weeks, right?
Yeah, 4 weeks now.
What's been going on? Like what have you been doing for the last 4 weeks?
Well, lots. I mean, there's been writing, there's been teaching, there's been prepping for. I've got travel coming up this weekend that I'm also getting ready for. I'm headed to Mystic South in
Super
Atlanta.
cool. Super
Um,
cool.
I've got a really fun class I'm doing at the end of the month. It's actually the first of a two-part about the history of crystal healing and lapidary medicine. So part one is from like prehistoric period. I mean, really the emphasis on where we have the most material evidence from like the Neolithic onwards, but there's stuff that's pre-Neolithic that I have some evidence for, all the way up through the end of the medieval period. So, and then the following month, I'll do the next installment, which is early modern period through today, with a special emphasis on like the last 100 years, because that's where we have the kind of beginnings of the modern crystal healing movement. But that's one I've done before, but I get to update it with new resources. I have a better
Mhm.
library than I had years ago when I did it, so I'm excited for this is one of the few topics I've actually presented at university level too. So that's exciting. And the other big thing I've been working on that I can talk about at least is music. I had
Mhm.
my first concert in 17 years, and I
So
performed
cool.
with a local ensemble called the Central Florida Sounds of Freedom, and they are an inclusive but LGBTQ plus focused ensemble that uses music to spread messages of equality and unity and acceptance. And they're just such a great crowd of humans. Like they're just phenomenal to spend time with. So I got to return
Mhm.
after a long time. And yeah, lots of plates spinning in the air, we'll say.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So have you taught at Mystic South before?
No, this will be my first time.
Okay, I haven't either, but I hear really good things about Mystic South. So good luck, break legs, just hopefully not your own. And yeah, that's very cool. That's very cool. And I'm really excited about your music. This is because you and I have that thing in common. We are both music people, who we're both professionally trained classic musicians, actually. And so it's so weird to say that. Like I was with somebody and I'm like, well, I really wouldn't. I mean, yes, I took private lessons and I was like in all the programs and did all the things, but I wasn't really a classic. Like I think of like going and taking private lessons in Italy or something like that's a classically trained. But you and I were both classically trained musicians, and so it's cool to like be that person and then go away, work on our careers for a long time, and then come back and then be like, oh, I still have this passion, this fire. I think that's one of the best things about getting older is rediscovering and refining. And so I'm really excited about your stuff. I'm very excited about that. Hello, Dadu Ballard. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, so it's been a really good. I have to stop using the word crazy. I'm such a 90s kid and I keep saying crazy and I'm like, actually, that's not a fantastic word to use. So I am going to get out of that. What word should I replace crazy with in my vocabulary? What do you think?
Busy, hectic, jumbled,
Busy,
mind-blowing,
mind blowing,
sensational.
mind blowing, sensation. It has been a sensational last couple of weeks, for sure. Yeah, I've been. So I went to Ohio to go do some stuff, and I came back. It was a really great trip, and I got to um, do some really cool stuff, and that no one's going to care about or understand. So I don't need to get into it. But so yeah, really cool stuff. Very nerdy band stuff, music stuff. And then I came back and I spent the whole day doing design work. And then yesterday went to another show and did that all night. And so I'm sleepy today. I was up all night long being a band nerd and I'm sleepy today.
I
So
think
I
we
guess yeah, I need some agate. I need some agate. Okay, so today we're going to talk about agate, and I love me some agate. I think it is one of the most kind of overused and misunderstood stones in the world. It's like kind of up there with quartz, where everybody recognizes it, everybody kind of sees it. But people, first of all, if you really get into stones and minerals, you find there's a lot more agates than you think there are. And agate is a huge, huge, huge family. So let's talk about agates. Let's talk about what's going on with them. Let's talk about, first of all, let's start with the fun stuff, which is what is the funniest way you've ever heard someone pronounce the word agate?
Oh, what a way to start. I think so, firstly, I want to start by saying not knowing how to pronounce a word or not knowing the generally accepted pronunciation is not a bad thing. It means that you've read it but maybe never heard it spoken, and because you're reading it, you're learning. And my favorite mispronunciation though is agate. Um, reading it as if, one might pronounce all of the vowels in it phonetically, like we would in Romance languages, like, Italian or Spanish, for example. That's definitely my favorite mispronunciation.
Yeah. Agate is my favorite. And being in California, I'm so everyone says agate, and I'm like, it's not agate. It's definitely not agate. Or a gate. Like somebody would come in and said, I need to buy a gate. And I'm like, we don't sell gates. Like I had no idea what they were talking about. And I was totally blind. And then it clicked in me. And I was like, okay, you mean this stone here and not that. So I feel this. Yeah. So it's a crystal person thing, where you notice all of the mispronunciations. The proper way to pronounce agate is agate. At least the way that I was taught, and you're usually the one correcting my my pronunciations of stuff. So we're on the same page. It's agate. And so let's talk about some agates,
Yeah.
Nicholas Pearson.
Side
All
note,
right.
it's
Yeah.
it's agate on our side of the pond, but on the
Yeah.
other side of the pond, they often say agate, not
Agate.
yeah,
So in the Queen's English, it's agate.
agate or agate. You can
Agate.
have either initial syllable. I think the latter sounds a
I
bit
like
more
agate better.
yeah,
Yeah.
agate. So
Agate.
some of my English British friends they pronounce it that way because it's the standard there, but we
Right.
somehow took on the agate kind of
Because
pronunciation.
I know. America, like the difference between the two Englishes are just fascinating sometimes, because it's definitely like we're lazy. Like we are a lazier group of people when it comes to pronunciations here in America when it comes to the English. Okay, so when it comes to agates, everyone loves them, and it's because they're pretty and they're easy to dye. They take pigment really well, and they also they're one of the stones that you can kind of experiment with, and they're forgiving in a way when it comes to lapidary stuff, and they're easy to carve, and so agates get used a whole bunch. And I know, like, I have bookends that are agates. I have a billion agate plates all over my house. My plants sit on a lot of agate slices and things like that. So I love agate. I work with agate a lot in plants. They have a wonderful copacetic relationship, and so you know agates are everywhere. Everybody loves agates. Why do we love agates, Nicholas? Why are agates so sexy? Why are we so attracted to them?
I mean, they're gosh darn charming, aren't they? They're like snowflakes. No two are ever going to be the same, and they're also because of that so exciting to collect. There are many books devoted just to agate collectors and to recognizing and IDing agates that come from all over the world. Their unique patterns of bands and textures and colors and the presence of other features, we'll say, in them can be telltale signs about where they come from. They have so much personality owed to the way they form and how that gives us so much variation. So it's no surprise. I think the earliest recorded use of agates that I can find is about 12,000 years old as well. So this is not a new phenomenon to be in love with them. We know that later than that period, in like the Sumerians, Mesopotamians, and other cultures in that kind of time frame, made ritual axes and seals from it, talismans and cabochons and beads, and lots of other items, particularly religious items that were used for spellcraft, ritual, and the rest. The Egyptians had a special affinity for sard, which is a really fine carnelian or reddish orange variety of agate. We find early examples of acupuncture needles being made from agate and flint in China millennia ago. Um, Early examples in Western Asia of agate jewelry have been uncovered that are at least 4,500 years old. Here in North America, the indigenous folks used moss agate and agatized wood or petrified wood for religious and spiritual purposes. So, there's something really human about finding character in this stone.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm getting things ready for other segments as they're coming up. It is absolutely all the things. One of the things that I was really surprised about when I came out this way was that there was art that was made from agate and various forms of agate by the indigenous people here. It was I don't know why I was surprised, but I was. And because I think I'm used to seeing things made out of obsidian and art pieces and ritual pieces and things like that. But agate was an interesting thing to find. Another interesting thing to find about agate is that it's, as I said before, it's really easy to carve. So we tend to have a whole lot going on with agate and um, the various forms and things that kind of come out, with agate. So we typically see it in the slices, so that those beautiful bands are represented. So let's talk about real quick, how do those bands come to be? So in a natural forming agate, let me see if I can pull up a good picture here. And in natural forming agate, here's a good one. So there's these beautiful bands. This isn't dyed. This is what it's going to look like if we pop that nodule out and we slice it in half here. So let's talk about these bands. How do they come about while the crystal is forming?
This is actually a really great example to show us what's happening. So I want to start by talking about the space it takes up, because for the agate to form, there has to be room for it. So these occur inside things that we call amygdalae or amygdaloids. We might also call them vesicles or scoria, little empty pockets in rock, often inside something like basalt or scoria or other kinds of extrusive igneous rocks, but they could happen in other places too. So we have a little empty pocket that's left by gas expanding while that rock is still molten, and then it cools and it leaves a void. And at a later stage, water percolating through the ground. This could be groundwater, it could be meteoric water, which comes from the sky, precipitation. It picks up silica, it dissolves it. If it is groundwater, maybe it's from a hydrothermal origin. So it's like the byproduct of all this molten rock escaping and, dissolving mineral substances. And there are still a couple ideas that are debated. Either that stuff kind of congeals into a gel or colloid, or it may stay in a relatively liquid state. But either way, there will be a little entryway. And the cross section of this one shows us toward the bottom. If you're looking at the screen the way I am, in the kind of bottom left quadrant, you see that little like tube shape extending from the bottom. That's like a little duct or vent where the silica would have flowed in. So essentially, it starts nucleating around the edge. When we look at it, you can see the kind of little bubbles or orb shapes that are sometimes in there. Those are the kind of starting places where the agate began to nucleate around the edges. And then we get these concentric rings that reflect changes in the solution, changes in its composition, what other trace elements or minerals that are in there. Sometimes we have level bands that appear, which could be from the action of gravity or changes in orientation of the host rock while it's forming. We could have empty spaces or little pockets of crystalline quartz that reflect changes in the rate of growth. So, we start out with an empty space, and this opportunistic silica rich fluid comes in and takes it over essentially and fills it with something beautiful.
Yeah, it's a really stunning process actually, and what I love about the process of them forming is that it's these beautiful kind of coats, and it's just gorgeous, and you pick up all of the things that are going on in the area. And so one of the things that when people are talking about like crystal vibrations and Let's say a crystal that developed in Brazil versus a crystal that developed in somewhere in, let's say, Moldova or something. Very random. And well, they're the same crystal. Do they have the same vibe? Do they? And my whole thing is well, there's a regional impression that the crystal is going to take on, right? And so when you have an agate, you can really pick up on that regional vibration, those regional energies. And so I think it's one of, and because it grows like everywhere. It's a really fun stone. If you're psychic and you like to tap into like different areas and things like that, I know you're a big fan of going to a location and finding the local mineral and tapping into it. For those of you at home who like to play around and things like that, you can find agates very inexpensively from different locations in the world, and you can tap into their natural frequency, the natural vibrations of the area and the region they come from. It's really neat. It holds memory in a way, energetically from their location, in a really fun, beautiful, unique way. And I think that's something that I love about them the most. So you're talking about all my favorite things. I have a couple questions for you though. So we have something like this agate, which is often referred to as like a thunder egg agate or something along those lines. So obviously, same kind of process. We have this, these minerals collecting after a gaseous pocket. What causes this star-like shape in this particular instance? Because this isn't that round shape that we see in the other agates.
So more than likely, and of course, different things could happen in different parts of the world. But what we often see in the thunder egg nodules is they actually start out as sedimentary rock, like a concretion or some other kind of consolidated soft material that came together, and it is through the action of like subsequent freezing and cracking that causes little fissures to open up inside them and make space rather than having been a pocket of gas to start with. And so we still get that colloid or fluid that comes in and fills it. I love this one because you can see that it's what we call a level banded agate, also sometimes called like a water level or spirit level. Nothing to do with like woo-woo kind of spirit, but like spirit levels they use in construction to make sure that things are perfectly even. And the bands aren't concentric. They're not fortification agates that form around the edges growing inwards. Instead, they build layer by layer this way, like sedimentary rock would.
I'm back. I'm here. I'm pulling up pictures. So one of the okay, so we're gonna switch to another crystal here. We got this beautiful specimen, and it's kind of hard to see here. I was trying to pull up a druzy, because druzy agates are really fascinating because it is a quartz inclusion, right? It's not agate forming the crystal, it's some sort of silica quartzy thing going on. Is that correct, or am I mistaken here?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, agates are quartz. So geologically speaking, agate is not a separate mineral species. We classify it as a micro or cryptocrystalline variety of quartz. And then different trace elements and different amounts of water and other things in the subsequent bands will give us the varying colors and textures. But agate crystallizes, or chalcedony technically is what we call cryptocrystalline quartz, crystallizes at a different rate than macrocrystalline. In other words, things we can see with the naked eye. So we see quartz in two stages in here. Two distinct phases or families of its expression. So we get the really fine druze that kind of coalesces in that open pocket there in the slightly off center part.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. I'm a big fan of druzy agate. So let me ask you, vibrationally, energetically, what is the difference between one of those nodules like the first we had seen, okay, where we've got these beautiful rounded bands. We've got, and we have, you spoke a little bit about this, but we've got this guy where, we've got these kind of horizontal bands that formed. And then we've got the druzy. And so where there's this little druzy inclusion. So vibrationally, as we're talking about going from that natural round banded to a flat banded to a druzy, what happens to the crystal's vibration as it, of the agate? Like, how do those habits affect what we're getting from a vibrational standpoint?
So I think of it as theme and variations. We're obviously dealing with the same creature in different personalities, different personas or masks that it wears. So the thing about agate is that its fundamental nature is one of change. the thing that all three of these rocks have in common that we've seen on the screen so far are that they are responding to their environment in real time. So they symbolize our own process of refinement, the kind of transitions that we experience. They stimulate movement and balance during those periods. So the kind of balance we might get from something that is a fortification agate that starts from the outside in and forms these beautiful concentric bands that are easy to see, definitely has this kind of pinpointing effect on it. When we look at something like this spirit level or the water banded agates that have the flat parallel bands in them, I think of them as a little bit more consolidating. It's like waiting for the dust to settle. Or conversely, maybe it's peeling through the layers of a concept, which is something I think all agates do, but those are really finely tuned to it. And then
Mhm.
when we look at something that's got the little pockets of drues, whether we can see discrete crystals like this, or in some agates, um, when you take a look at the cross section of them, you can clearly see that quartz, crystalline quartz, has filled in all the available space in the middle and created a kind of lacy or geometric pattern. And I think of those as helping us arrive at a state of clarity, a state of luminosity, as we rely on some of the other actions of agate. Its ability to separate the clear from the unclear, the ability to harmonize, the ability to, we'll say, filter out the things that aren't
Mhm.
leading us toward clarity.
Yeah, it's a fantastic filter stone, especially if you're a creative person or if you're a busy mind person. It's a really wonderful stone to help bring focus and refinement to things. The reason why I love working with it is that it is so forgiving, and as you just said, we've got this process of change and things, and it's very good with change. So that's probably why it is so forgiving. It is a stone for the masses, if you will. I mean, it truly is, because it's readily available, it's inexpensive, and it is one that, like, we're all changing all the time. All of us are going through changes. All of us are, hopefully, all of us are growing, right? Hopefully, all of us are in a place where we are always going to be refining ourselves. And if you're a spiritual person, we're all working on that shadow work. We're all doing that stuff. Agate's really great to help partner as we're moving through that. So one of the things that agate is famous for is that it does tend to accept dye very easily, or pigments very easily. I'm going to pull up two specimens here. The first one is blue and the second one is orange, just to show some of the contrast. And this is so clearly dyed, but a lot of people don't know. I mean, we can see that, but a lot of people don't understand that that is not necessarily what. I mean, this one may be a little, but it's probably still treated somehow.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we get a sense of is the variation among the layers, because we can see that some of them are super permeable. The dye intrudes into them regularly. But then, we've got like the white bands in this one, or the clear sections in the previous one, where obviously the dye didn't sink in as well. And if we were to magnify these, if we were to look at them under the right kind of lighting with good magnification, we could see how uneven the acceptance of the dye really is. And if you ever want to know if an agate that you've got is dyed, I mean, first off, if it's a fluorescent color, it's almost guaranteed it's going to be dyed. But the other thing that you could do would be an acetone soak. So if you have nail polish remover, you could put a little piece of tumbled agate in there and leave it overnight. And the next morning, if it has been dyed, that solution is going to have changed color, like the color of the stone, and it will probably fade a little bit. So, be mindful of that. But they're really charming. I don't use dyed agates in my therapeutic practice, but I have a number of them around. I have my favorite wind chime is made out of dyed agate slices, and I went through something like 40 or 50 of them to find the one that was the most musical and ringing of them all. And it happily hangs in my home outside if it's not too blustery, because I love it and it brings me joy. And I also want to just kind of like pick up on something that you mentioned earlier. You mentioned agate is kind of like the stone of the everyman. It's something for everybody. And there's actually a little bit of agate history that reflects this. And after the French Revolution, when the monarchy was overthrown, Um, oh, are we experiencing some technical difficulties here?
Hello, I'm back. I don't
Hello, hello.
I
Sorry.
don't know what happened. I was like texting you. It's a whole thing. I don't know. Internet weirdness. So the last thing I heard before the internet went wonky, we were talking about the progression of that energy as it's going from of the crystal going from banded to those horizontal lines to something that's like a druzy. I keep saying druzy, but you say druze. And so am I saying it wrong? Is it druze?
So, druze is the material. Druzy is an adjective that describes the material.
Ah, okay.
So
All
you
right.
could
So
call an agate druzy, but if I'm just talking about that layer of crystals on top, that is the druze itself.
that is the druze itself. Okay. All right. See, I this it's good to have very smart friends like you. All right. So the last thing I remember you saying, just so we can kind of hit back in the discussion, is we were talking about that druze. So what does that do? How does that lift the vibration? How does that direct the vibration?
I mean, it gives us macrocrystalline quartz, something we can actually see with our eyes, has as visible crystals. Because in the case of the rest of its makeup, it's still made out of quartz, but it's so compact and actually rather fibrous that it's got a softer overall presence. And when we add a druze, whether we can see the crystal faces like in this one, or when they kind of compact together and fill the space, we add a little more oomph to it, I would say.
All right, fantastic. Now, okay, so the next thing on my list is now I want to remember and I start talking about, which is the colors, the dyes. So it takes pigment really well. And we've got these two variations here. So we've got the blue, which I was shown up before, and then we've got this orange. So first of all, what type of dye does somebody even use when they want to dye a stone? Like, how does that, what's going on there?
I mean, lots of dyes. Often these will be not food grade dyes.
Right, right.
So we want to
They're
make
not
sure.
organic dyes. That's
No,
not
definitely
happening.
not. They're going to
Yeah.
be metallic dyes, not so
Mhm.
much that they cause a metallic color, but in the fact that they're based on metals, oxides, sulfides, that kind of thing. And the reason that agate takes this on is because if we imagine what the unit cell, the smallest fundamental unit of quartz is, it's a little tetrahedron of silica, and it forms these
Mhm.
little chains where the tetrahedron, which is kind of like a pyramid, stands corner to corner. And so it makes this kind of helix. And in the case of agate, instead of just one big framework that it builds out of that, it's lots of
Mhm.
these strands that are trying to like cram together. But since they're twisty, there's always space between them. You can't get them to settle in with no gaps because of that kind of helical shape and the fact that
Mhm.
it's not a square or cube or something that packs together really
Right,
nicely. So
right.
there's always going to be vacancies in between the fibrous structure where it can either house other natural occurring minerals, varying amounts of water and mogonite and other things that affect the clarity of it, or if we soak it in the right solution for long enough, we can impregnate it with these metallic compounds to give us lots of different colors.
How long does that take usually?
I honestly don't know.
Okay.
That'd
Yeah.
be something I could look
I I know I watched people in Tucson like cut agates like fresh. They just had the nodules and they were slicing them in half. And sometimes there'd be water that was like trapped and came out and it was neat stuff. But the dye, I always assume like that's gotta take a minute. Like that can't just be like, oh, over the weekend kind of a thing. That's probably several months to a couple years, I would assume. But knowing the crystal industry, they probably just like superheat them somehow or something, and takes a week.
Yeah, I just looked it up. It's a relatively short soak, and then they fix it with heat. So they have to
There we go.
essentially dehydrate
Okay.
it to get the color.
Oh, okay. So that makes total sense. All right, I learned something today. That's very cool. Okay, so we've got those diet. What does that do to the vibration? What do you think?
Mm.
Mm,
Well, if you're really into color therapy, it gives you the psychological impact of that color.
mhm,
But the energy of agate is somewhat porous because the structure of agate is somewhat porous.
mhm.
So if I'm trying to use a sponge to wash my dishes and it gets really full of gunk and grime, unless I remove that stuff from its makeup, it's no longer effectively doing its job. So I personally think that dyed agates are probably just a little too full of stuff to do their job as effectively
Hmm.
as possible.
Hard agree. Yeah, hard agree on that one. Yeah. And you can feel the difference. Like you, I mean, you absolutely can feel the difference when you go to pick it up because one feels clean, like energy, passes through it very quickly, very easily. And then one feels like there's like a mesh, some sort of energetic mesh kind of there. So absolutely. So we talked about different, the kind of the basic idea of like what the frequency is of the stone and what it's transmitting out there to the rest of the world. When we are talking about some of that higher vibrational stuff, and we're talking about the consciousness of agate and the partnerships and the work that we can do with it, what do you find to be some of the more potent aspects of that energy? And do you have any, like, we each you have all these stories about, like, oh, I worked with this energy and I got this out of it, and it told me this, and I have those stories too. And so I'm curious because agate is something that everybody loves, and do you have an agate story? Like, do you have, something that is like a fun Nicholas? We didn't talk about this before the show. I probably should have.
Yeah,
So,
I'm
yeah.
I'm sure I can come up with something. Um, so when I take a look at how agate's been used over the years and what its kind of general properties are, magically people associate it with stuff like luck and good fortune because it's a very mercurial stone. It's ruled by the planet Mercury in most cases. Different agates certainly have different personalities, but a good general idea is that they're connected to Mercury as well as to Gemini. They're very mutable, they're very changeable. They've got this ability to adapt. So they help us through adaptation. But they have seen humankind through some very interesting phases and changes in human history. And in particular, agate got really popular after the French Revolution because precious gemstones were associated with royalty, and that was a thing they were really not into. So they wanted a gem that symbolized everybody, that we were all in this together. And the great diversity that we see among agates, even in a single species, when we slice it open, we look at all the different layers. They're not the same thickness. They don't have the same mineral content. They vary in color and texture and all sorts of great things, and yet they come together to create this harmonious bigger picture. So I think that agates in the new eon signify this kind of egalitarianism. They enjoin people of different backgrounds, help create a harmonious whole. It highlights commonalities while honoring differences. It says, hey, we don't have to be the same. We don't have to have identical lived experiences. And yet, here we are together. So it's a really humble and common stone, but it's really a fine material to carve from, especially when you have great quality agates. And that also kind of reminds me of the humility of being human, coupled with like the big cosmic aha of like we're made out of the same stuff that stars are. So it can be something that kind of peels back the layers of trauma, whether that's personal or collective, to help us reach the kind of root cause of an issue that makes it really pivotal for healing in the here and now. And as far as a specific agate story, you know, I I don't know if I have like a single story, but I can tell you about the story of my favorite agate. This is gonna be our consolation prize, and it is an agate called Dulcote agate from Dulcote Quarry in the Mendip Hills in Somerset in the UK, of course, because most of my favorite rocks are from there. And I had been on a mission for some to share at a retreat in 2019. And really, I wanted a nice one for myself. And after much searching, I managed to find just enough tumbled stones on the internet to give one to everybody in the retreat except myself. And then, as luck would have it, when we hit Glastonbury and I got to spend a day on High Street and do some shopping ahead of my class, they had exactly one slice of Dulcote agate. And it's a nice big chunk. So I didn't hesitate. I just picked it up. It was mine. I knew I had to have it. And a lot of the themes that we worked on, I was in this retreat with my friends, Karen Ainsworth and Dan Lupicino, and our goal, our theme, our organizing kind of mission of it was healing the heart of the mother. And when I finally got to inspect this agate after washing it in the waters of Chalice Well, Let's see if this shows up on camera. Right here, it has this little teeny heart inside it, close to the nucleation point, probably close to where the little entryway for at least one of the little pockets of agate to form was. So it is one of my favorite heart healing allies,
That's really sweet.
isn't
That's
it?
super cute. Yeah, that's a super cute story. Yeah, no, I figured you had something. You had some cute little endearing thing about agate that has come up, and yeah, and I was right. I knew it. So we're running out of time, but I want to get to another type of agate that is really popular. And when we had the store, people came in all the time looking for blue lace agate. This was the stone that everybody was freaking out about. Yeah. And then I'll put a picture up here online. So, blue lace agate. This is usually what we see. So we usually see it kind of like this, where it's already out and polished and whatnot. But this is what a just coming right out from the nodule looks like. So, blue lace agate is very popular. It is something that, again, people were coming in asking for all the time, and there people would come in for different reasons looking for it. So, there must have been a book that came out that had it in because suddenly it was like the most popular stone in the store. So, what is it about blue lace agate that it makes blue lace agate, we'll say, at least from the crystal healing perspective world, a little bit more um, uh, desirable?
I mean, for one, look at that color. How many nice blue gems do we really get at affordable prices? And I say affordable, but the cost of this has risen, 4 or 5 times what it was 6, 7 years ago because it is not plentiful. The primary sources of it are in Namibia and Malawi, and they're fewer and farther between than they used to be. One of the things that I love most about it is that there's actually no blue pigment in it. And if you have a really nice one and you hold it up against a super bright light, when the light passes through it, it'll be maybe grayish, could be peach colored, kind of, we'll say neutral in color. And so its color comes from a structural phenomenon. It's the same Rayleigh scattering, the same effect that causes our atmosphere to be blue. So I think there's a kind of magic in there in helping us see things for more than what they are. And this gem therapeutically has the ability to kind of help us sort through the stuff in our psyche, to help let go of the things that stand in the way of our ideal expression of the self. And that concept, ideal expression of the self, or maybe authentic expression of the self, that is highly personal. So there's no single end result that we all experience, except there are hallmarks of it. A sense of authenticity in our lived experience, greater resilience. We're less likely to be knocked off center by things. We are less likely to take on other people's stuff because our aura recognizes that's not ours. And we've just done this job of unburdening all the expectations and ideas and programming that wasn't ours to begin with. And so it gives us this inner sense of confidence that changes what happens in the world around us. And I know a lot of people think of this as a throat chakra stone, because at the end of the day, the more we work with it, the better we are at communicating. But that's not its goal. That's kind of like the side effect when we look at those deeper principles. And honestly, a lot of those ideas of selfhood, identity, resilience, they're rooted in, if we're using a chakra model like the solar plexus. So I think of it as a really great solar plexus stone that just happens to have the side effect of helping us communicate more authentically.
Absolutely. Yeah. Bada bang. I know a lot of people, the reason people were coming in the store was that it was supposed to be very good for helping you understand. I mean, shadow worky stuff. Yeah. But it was also like your psychic ability and being able to tap into it and a way that it helps you bypass a lot of the BS. And so
Totally.
it's often recommended for people who are doing psychic development. All right. So, speaking of recommendations, it is time for Crystal Remedies. Disclaimer: neither Devin nor Nicholas are qualified healthcare providers. Please remember this, everyone. We cannot diagnose, prescribe, or treat medical conditions of any kind. This segment is intended as an informational guide only, and the crystal recommendations described herein are meant to be supplemental, never a substitute for professional medical care or treatment. Just have to make sure everyone is aware that we are not doctors, and that you should always do crystal healing in relation and correspondence with traditional methods of healing and medicine. Very, very important. As this segment has become pretty popular and people have all kinds of questions, and a lot of it, people want us to do a show specifically on crystal healing techniques and crystal healing stuff, which we're going to do. We have so much to talk about when it comes to the crystal world. We're never going to be out of stuff to talk about. But for this segment, we just want to make sure everybody's aware, like, we don't be a smart crystal person, right? Be a smart crystal person. But these are also meant to not be super serious necessarily. So yeah. All right. So anyway, crystal prescriptions. You ready? All right. We got 10.
I'm ready.
All right. What would you recommend for someone who wants to win back an ex?
A really expensive stone.
Yes. Probably, right?
Right.
Yeah, no, what would you use? Like,
I think I might do something like Morganite. So I would be inclined to do soul searching about why that might have happened and be a little bit more tender and loving and understanding for their needs.
That's so high vibrational of you, and I love it. I would go with something like Garnet,
Okay.
to definitely tap into the lusty primal aspect of that connection, and make it more important than whatever the problems were. That's what I would do. But I'm not as high vibrational as you are, Nicholas. It's just how it is. All right. What crystal would you use to help you leave a party early?
Oh, Larvikite.
Larvikite. Totally.
It's
Totally.
like a cloak of invisibility. Like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm at my
Fancy me.
introvert threshold. Bye.
Yep. Yep. Totally. I have, so I collect weird stones like you, and so I have this obsession with sulfur, like crystallized sulfur. It's not something you want to just, it's not a pocket stone, but it is something that yeah, so I keep sulfur, and it's very easy to make people leave you alone if you carry sulfur. Okay, so stones to help you connect with your ancestors.
Oh, so I'm really fond of petrified wood and
Mm-hmm.
fossilized coral for this.
Ditto. Those are my two big ones I go to, and a little bit on the onyx side.
I could definitely see that.
Yeah. But totally it's all about that. Oh, and jet is because it's basically petrified wood. So yeah, so it's those two. Yeah, 100%. How about deities? What about what makes a good offering to a deity? This is something that comes up a lot. People actually, they want to leave a physical item that's going to last and not just decay or whatever. So let's talk about that. So what would you, for your particular path, your particular set of spirits that you work with, what would you leave and why?
So I'm a big fan of tailoring the offering to the work you're doing,
Mm-hmm.
to the deity on the other side, the other half of that work, and also, what is the nature of your individual relationship? And if you
Mm-hmm.
need inspiration for some goddesses and their correspondences, Stones of the Goddess has a whole table in there.
Whole table. Yeah.
I think it's like 100 or more goddesses and then a
Yeah.
bunch of stones for each one. But if we want something kind of general, I really love ammonite. Ammonite is a great one for the kind of cyclic nature that we have with the divine, the remembrance that we're part of that cycle too. We're here
Mm-hmm.
to eventually, we hope, re-embody that God self, that inner divinity. You can't go wrong with just good old-fashioned quartz because it's so foundational.
Yeah.
I think also selenite, because selenite kind of helps us integrate this kind of vertical relationship with the divine versus a horizontal ontology. It sees that kind of vertical connection. So we have that kind of help looking over our shoulder at all the times.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm so boring. Because I worship a moon goddess, so she gets a lot of moonstone and different variations of moonstones and different feldspars, because that's what she gets. Any of the witch queen, that's what she gets. And then again, super boring. Mr. Man gets things like sunstone and like very bright stones, or lighter green stones. That seems to be a thing. But I'm a big fan of, like, I mean, there's my standards like moonstones and things like that. But I'm a big fan of going into a place and letting them kind of tell me what they want. And that's something that I know not everybody's comfortable with. Not everybody feels like they've got the chutzpah to do that, or the riz to make that happen. But it's just an intuitive process, right? So because I think offerings are that, like, it is about what do you want? What do you want today? Okay, so how about when we're doing things like psychic development, working on clairaudience? Clairaudience, the ability to hear, clear hearing, is not super rare, but it's not on the most like super prevalent side either. And so, and usually it's working in correspondence with other things. And so, when we're just talking about hearing and that psychic ability to hear, what's your go-to stone?
So one of my teachers actually uses blue lace agate for this.
Hmm.
So since that's on brand, we'll say that. But I want to give you something fresh and new, and I would pick probably flint.
Oh, I like
Because
that.
good quality flint has a tendency to be a natural lithophone. It will ring,
Hmm.
so it's got this kind of auditory quality to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I that's a much better probably than what I would tell people to do, which is probably would blow them out, which is Moldavite. I'd be like, you actually want Moldavite, but specifically the angel chime Moldavite, because of what it does. But that's a really good like snapping all of the white noise out kind of a thing. But it really is that angel wing Moldavite. You got to get that ting ting ting. It's really trippy. Fulgurite.
Oh yeah.
So fulgurite is fantastic for said things as well. Makes a big boom when it gets created. It's very nice. Okay, how about stones to help you remember to get your oil changed? This is a big one. I struggle with this. If I didn't have that little sticker, the SOL. So crystals for oil changes.
Ooh, I'm really tempted to say something like one of our carbon friends. That could be shungite, it could be jet, it could be good old-fashioned coal. Maybe it's
Mhm,
a piece of petroleum included quartz, but you would get the physical
mhm.
reminder that it shares something in its makeup with the stuff that makes our car run.
Absolutely, yeah. And oil is not just decayed dinosaurs. We were all lied to as children. The Okay, so yeah, that's a really good. I would say something along those lines. Carbony, yeah, 1000%. Stones to help you when you're dealing with trolls on social media.
Um, I'll
I have had so much of this. I got a list of crystals.
tell you one stone that didn't help me with that, but that's a whole other conversation for Um, honestly, I think any crystal that's going to help you develop a thicker skin. So maybe it's our friend agate and will stay on brand because it has that kind of filtering quality. And maybe it is just a stone that is so grounded and so like in your face about being present that it doesn't matter what people on the other side of the planet say through
Mhm.
the internet. So maybe we'll pick some hematite or some, red jasper, something that's got some iron to it to feel like a badass because you are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say the same thing, but the hematite specifically, get a like a really good piece of hematite that's reflective-y and you're set.
Yeah.
So yeah, bouncing. Yeah, I think it is about thicker skin, but it also bouncing that crap back. Okay, so last one, which is very, very prevalent to me right now, which is stones to help you get through your to be read pile of books before you go buy more books.
If I found a stone that worked for this,
Right?
right? No, but
So bad.
seriously, I think something that we could contemplate is maybe something that's good for how we spend our money rather than the habit of reading. So, if I want to be a little bit more of a spendthrift, one of the gems that I like to use is peridot, which is kind of
Mhm.
ironic since it's a little bit of a spendy stone.
It's not so yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's a little pricey. I mean, it can be very, very pricey, but yeah, depending on yeah. I saw some really pretty peridot, like some ridiculous pretty peridot, and it was so pricey. And I was like, why is this more expensive than the like incredible Herkimer diamond set? That's like it was just anyways the thing. It can go both ways, definitely for sure. With that, I okay. So let me ask you a side question here: reading comprehension. So, what stone would you work with for reading comprehension?
Fluorite and or aquamarine.
I knew you were gonna say fluorite. I knew you were gonna say fluorite. That's like you love you some fluorite, sir.
I require fluorite in my life. So whether I like it for itself or for the fact that it's a trusted ally,
Yeah. Yeah, it's a fantastic stone. Well, Nicholas, thank you so much for joining me today for this episode. We didn't do one 2 weeks ago, and so it feels weird when we skip an episode. So I'm very glad that we came back, and we'll be back in 2 weeks. We do have soon we'll be releasing information about the Crystal Magic Intensive, which is going to be very cool. And you're going to be at Mystic South this weekend. Is there anything else coming up in the next 2 weeks that you want to talk about real quick?
Yeah, so if anyone's interested in joining my 2-part history of crystal healing class, it's called Holy Gems and Healing Crystals, the history of lapidary medicine from the ancient world to today. The first installment is later this month. I've got 2 ways you can sign up. You can either just buy a ticket. There'll be a link on my website to do that. Or on my link tree if you follow me on social media, or you can become a Patreon subscriber, and any of my Patreon tiers will get automatic access to both parts of this event. And the first one of those is going to be, I think, on the 29th, and then 2 weeks later in August, we'll do part 2.
Fan-freaking-tastic. Thank you so much. And where can people find you online?
So you can find me at the Luminous Pearl on social media, any and or all of them. And then if you head on over to my website, theluminous.pearl.com, it's your one-stop shop for all of my upcoming events and other great stuff. I finally updated it.
Woohoo. All right. And as always, you can go to modernwitch.com. You can find out all of the latest things that we have working on over here. Storm is kicking butt over at Modern Witch University, and there's this fantastic group of people who are taking classes, and hopefully maybe you might want to be one of those people. So definitely check that out. In the meantime, you can just find me as Mr. Devin Hunter on all the social medias, including Threads, which is a really fantastic experience for those of you who have hopped on over. It's so sad to leave Twitter. It is so sad to leave Twitter, but it is happening, and it's a thing that's going down. So if you were on Twitter and you're like, that stuff sucked, come on over to Threads, and we have a much cooler group of there's crystal people that are always talking down there now. There's amazing metaphysicians that are doing their stuff too. So social media is changing, and I'm here for it. It's good stuff. So anyway, find us on all the things. Come party with us in 2 weeks. We're going to be talking about another great set of stones, and we're going to try to get this crystal healing episode out to you quicker than not. So do send your stuff. You can always send it to devin@modernwitch.com if you have questions or something that we'd like to address on the show, and we're here for you, folks. But anyway, okay, that's it. Thanks for everything, and we will see you in just a few weeks.
Bye, everyone.